Hey everybody, what up? Scuff D here. And today, oh, hang on a second, because if I do get to do this every time, it just makes things fun.
You look so small. Don't you know armor doesn't bleed?
All right, that's enough of that. Good grief. Okay, so stupid shit. Stupid shit. Today I'm going to be going and talking about the Custodes, Legio Custodes, card by card breakdown. It's time. It's time to do it. The Legio Custodes are they're a very powerful faction. They're the third faction in the Prospero Burns, or the Prospero expansion. I don't think they're calling it Prospero Burns, but we know what's going on. The Prospero expansion. They've got some interesting exclusive things that are that currently are just for them, and they offer a different way to play, which I enjoy, and I think with the I think they're still new. There's still some stuff to explore with them. So let's take a look at the Legio Custodes. Now, before we get looking, let's take a look at two specific things that factor in regarding to the Legio Custodes. First off, we'll take a look with the Sentinel. This is an example of a card that has got it. So, Sentinel is an ability. While this card is in play, you don't draw cards at the start of your turn. It's kind of like a card maintenance, essentially, rather, whereas demons have, energy maintenance for one, maintenance for two. Simply by having troops with Sentinel on the board, you are giving up the opportunity to draw a new card at the start of your turn, which can have major implications through the course of a game, depending on when you play troops with Sentinel and the value that they offer. You can still draw cards normally with the cards that draw you cards, like Tissue Divinatus, Abandoned Supplies, but you're not drawing cards just automatically at the start of your turn. And that can play into factor in the attrition game. And then another ability that the Legio Custodes have is First Strike, which we can see here on Aracide Nassau. Now, if you haven't seen my video on Nassau, I think I've done two, but there was an event video, and then there was one where I did him break down. Check it out. It's fun. I'm having fun with Nassau. But First Strike, if you play Magic the Gathering, and it's been years since I played, but First Strike is pretty much exactly how it sounds. When attacking, enemies killed don't retaliate. First Strike is kind of the way Sneak Attack works. However, it's not automatic. You've got Sneak Attack, which is just you do damage, and whatever you're attacking doesn't do damage back to you. You've got Terror, which is basically, so long as you have a higher attack value than the other than the troop that you're attacking, they're not going to attack back. So you kind of have like a conditional sneak attack. First Strike is specifically gauging off of the health of the remaining units. So Nassau's got 2, he does 2 damage. If there is a troop that is a 10 attack, but it only has 2 health left, he can attack it with First Strike and take no damage. However, if it has 3 health, he's going to take the full 10 and he's going to deal 2, just as he normally would. Pizza's in the oven here. Hang on a second. I'm gonna check it in just a minute. I'm getting hungry. I'm gonna need to eat for the Custodes. I've got Sentinel in my belly. So First Strike is very similar to Magic in terms of if you can kill it before it can do its damage, you kill it. It doesn't do its damage. However, unlike Magic, where if you've got both units with First Strike, they attack simultaneously. Or at least I believe. It's been years since I played that, but I believe if both units have First Strike, it's like they both attack at the same time. In this case, they do not. In this case, if First Strike is not a defensive ability, it does not trigger on your turn. It only triggers, or does not trigger on your opponent's turn, rather. It only triggers on your turn. So if you've got a troop with 5 health and First Strike, but your opponent has got a troop with 5 attack and First Strike, it's going to kill your troop. And we'll see this here as we take a look at some of the cards down the road. So those are the two big components of the Custodes. The Custodes themselves thematically are superior to the Adeptus Astartes. They're better than Space Marines. They're not as good as Primarchs, Or are they as good as Primarchs? That's arguable and debatable. They're much closer to the Emperor. They are not only his bodyguard, they are his companions. They're viewed differently in terms of how he interacts with them. They are the boys in gold. They are everything that's shining example, and perhaps no more so than the Space Marines as far as the concepts of what the Emperor's Great Crusade and Enlightenment is all about. So they are very interesting thematically, and I think the cards in their card pool do a great job of portraying who they are. I'm not going to go into great detail about Nassau here, but I've talked about him in general. However, his ability and his passive, he's having first strike, having the ability to deal 2 damage, like many 30 health warlords, Loken, even 35 health warlords such as Nev and Tarek deals 1, but I mean, it's just deal 2 damage. But the fact that if it dies, you gain precognition, it is so versatile. This is just a great warlord ability. If you do not have Nassau, pick him up when he's in the shop. If you can't get him, he'll be 100 gems for you, but he's a great gateway warlord. And the great thing about the Custodes, as we'll take a look in here, you don't need to have a lot of Custodes cards to do a good Custodes deck. You need a couple good key cards, but Nassau can work wonderfully just with a good neutral card pool. He's strong. He's got the ability to be offensive as well as not quite defensive, but hard to hit. Giving himself precognition is just a great ability, especially given the fact that he's got 30 health. Now, obviously, having 30 health makes him susceptible to shorter games, but he can really draw out that long game. He's just a great, solid warlord. So again, if you see him and you're curious about the Custodes, you want to give him a try, he's a great way to start out and give yourself a taste of what the Custodes bring. Let's take a look at Constantine Valor. Wow. Oh, actually, before I go here, I'm only missing one Custodes card, but I don't want to miss it when we talk about it. So Valdor is basically their legendary warlord. He's not a Primarch, but in the terms of the game, he's got the same rarity as a Primarch. You're not going to find him in the shop unless there's some sort of special deal going on. He's got a great ability for the Custodes. For a standard warlord, is it a great 2? Draw a troop from your deck for 2 energy. So for 2 energy, he basically has an ability similar to Horus. He's got the same initiative as Horus. The only difference is he's not drawing a card, he's drawing a troop specifically. So depending on how you've got your deck built and organized, you could have a very tactic-heavy troop, a very tactic-heavy deck with just specific troops in your deck. If you use him properly, you're going to get the troops that you want because you're drawing a troop. If you have a heavy troop deck, you're going to draw a card at the cost of not being able to use him. It kind of works in terms of his ability. It kind of works to help supplement or get around having massive amounts of troop with Sentinel. You're not going to use Valdor to attack. You're kind of paying an upkeep and 2 energy to draw a card, but you're still being able to draw a card by using his ability. So Valdor decks, I think people are still trying to work to find a way to make Valdor work. He works. He doesn't quite have a niche, but just being able to have Sentinel troops on the table and still get cards in your hand, your opponent can't ignore what you're putting down. And that's actually, in of itself, is very valuable. Now, he has a Reckoning. He has a Reckoning here. Let's take a look at it. So, he becomes the Emperor's Spear, and it costs -1 when you have no other cards in hand at the end of your turn. Now, because it's a cost 14, that means at the end of your turn, you have to have at least 4 turns where you have 0 cards in your hand other than the Reckoning in order for it to be 10 cost. That's kind of hard to do. If you're using his ability, you're not going to be able to use his Reckoning because you're giving yourself cards. Unless you're drawing with his ability and playing the troop in the same turn, you're going to still have cards in your hand. He then becomes the Emperor's Spear, which is a 340, and he gains first strike as well as the ability to give himself +1/+0 until the end of turn and connect again. Just on its own, if we just took it at straight value, let's say you have 10 energy. Late game, you gain the 8 health from using his Reckoning. You survive. Your next turn, you can blow all 10 energy to make him an 8 attack with first strike. And he can act. So you can make him an 8 attack, and then he can attack with 8 and either kill something with first strike, because gosh, 8 attack, that's pretty gnarly, or finish the game because it's 8 damage. That's just with him and his ability and his attack as it is. That's not counting any other cards that we're going to see here down the road. Very powerful. It pretty much locks down the game. That's it. But again, it is harder to get to. It's a much trickier reckoning because you have to basically give up having cards in your hand for 4 turns. You could play with what you're drawing with his ability, but you still are going into your next turn with 0 cards in hand. That could have its own implications. So we're not seeing a lot of decks that massively go for this reckoning. It can work. It's harder to work, but if it does, look out, because I'm sorry, I don't know how many turns you can take 8 damage to the face. I mean, theoretically, I guess if you had 40 health, you could do it for 5 turns, but you're never going to be in that state. So I'm going to be right back with some pizza, and we're going to take a look at the last current warlord. Did you really have to make yourself pizza in the middle of a card-by-card video? And the answer is yes, I'm hungry. So, Vetriano Shapura. We've got ourselves here a Dreadnought, which is awesome. There's not enough Dreadnoughts, Warlords, in the game. There's Dreadnoughts in just about every faction, but as far as Warlords go, not so much. Now, he is a Moritoi Perfectus. Moritoi is the Dreadnought class of the Legio Custodes. Vetriano Shapura has got an amazing ability. He's also got some cool artwork. So for 2 energy, he gives himself shield and frontline until your next turn. What that basically is that's a variation of the Amadeus Duquesne ability. Now, Duquesne himself doesn't see a whole lot of play in ladder, and Shapura, I think, has got ways to find his niche. For 1 energy additional, you're giving yourself frontline, but you're also gaining shield. You're not gaining the heal 1 to adjacent troops. What does that mean? Well, it means that just in the matchup against a solo warlord, or a warlord that doesn't run a whole lot of troops, you've got an edge. You're going to have shield. Your opponent is either going to have to throw something at your shield to break it before they can do damage, or they're going to have to give up attacking you. And if they're giving up attacking you, you've got the option to throw several troops behind you that are doing things, whether that is the Helios Mortar Carriers, Jubak, some of the cards that we're going to take a look at here down the road. I think Moritoi Perfectus, Vetriano Shapura, I think he's got a lot of potential in terms of working with neutral cards. Mount Pharos, Tisca, or not, was it Tisca? What's the new shiny temple here? There we go, the Pyramid of Photep. There you go, Pyramid of Photep. Things that give him cards, because again, with Legio Custodes, it might not necessarily be a great thing to park a bunch of Sentinel troops behind it, because then you're paying 2 energy to not do anything except give yourself shield, and you're going to run out of cards. You're not going to draw cards. You have to have card drawing power. But if you've got guys like Jubak, guys like the Mount Pharos and a tactic generating card, you've even got Alpha Theta, the Mechanicum troops, the neutral guys sitting behind you generating tactics, generating Mechandrites, Alpha Theta 2. You are giving yourself, number 1, options in terms of offense and defense, however you choose to use it, whether they're giving you bonus attack Mechandrites or whatever. You're keeping them alive. Your opponent has got to throw tactics at them, not at your warlord who has shield. It's just super locked in. The downside with that being is it does take some time to build up, because every turn you can't just throw Jubak down. You've got to throw Jubak down with 5 energy, enough to be able to throw him down, plus play your ability in order to really ensure him. So you're kind of playing behind. I think a deck that uses Shapura may want to consider using Asteroid Sanctuary in order to buff up the energy early in the game if possible. However, if you can get that down there, your opponent's options are going to be limited to either unstoppable troops or direct damage or widespread damage, and either which way, that's not anything that they're going to throw at your warlord. They're going to be throwing it at your troops, and hopefully you get some value out of them, and you're able to then bring in the big guns at the end of the game, and the big guns at the end of the game are going to be your Custodes cards. I want to play Shapura, but I'll tell you what, I've actually I kind of have a problem. My problem is this. My problem is I don't have enough deck slots. I'm out of deck slots, baby. I'm out of deck slots. Look, I had to make I had to make an exception for the new Russ. That's it. I'm out of deck slots. As you can see, I don't even have a Magnus deck. I shouldn't even be playing this out. I don't even have a Magnus deck, man. And we're getting Greybeard. I would love to play a Shapura deck, but the fact is, I just don't have a deck slot for him just yet. But it's coming. It's coming. Come on, Everguild. Give us more deck slots, because I want to play Shapura. Now, the Imperial Bureaucrat. These guys are pretty cheap. It's kind of a goofy artwork there, but he looks like, oh! I don't know what he's staring at. Relentless draw card. Very cheap, low health, easily gotten rid of. However, early in the game, if you happen to have one or two of these guys, you can drop them, and your opponent then has to make a choice. Do they get rid of the Bureaucrat, or do they give you an additional card every turn? And if you are Shapura, these guys are great free cards, because unless they've got an artillery strike or a direct damage ability from the warlord or something like that, you have got them protected. You're giving yourself a free card every turn, and because they don't have Sentinel, you're still drawing a card. So they're not bad. They're also decent late game if you've got other Sentinel cards on the table. They don't go in every deck. I think depending on how you build your deck down the road, you'll find other ways to give yourself cards. But for an early Custodes player, they're not bad. They're not bad. Now, Ares Guard, we already took a look at in terms of Sentinel. What makes these guys so neat is the fact that they're 2 energy for 3/4. Stat-wise, 3/4 frontline normally costs you 4 energy, typically. And some of that is with conditions, whether there's an infantry on the table or it's the first card that first troop on board. These guys are just straight for 2 energy. You're getting a 3/4 frontline, and that's why you get Sentinel. That's why you get that drawback. Do not be fooled by these guys. These guys are a great card mid-game. They are not a card to play first turn. If you play these first turn in the game, unless you're Valdor, who can then follow it up on his next turn by still drawing cards, you've given me a troop that I can ignore for 2 or 3 turns and draw up my cards. I'll eat the 3 from this twice. I'll eat 6 damage if it costs you 2 or 3 turns of card drawing. Very good card. I usually put them in my Nassau deck because they're cheap and they're a front line, and I can get around it. But you have to know when to play them. You have to know when to play them. Now, Blood Games is a great tactic here. If you have got a decent mix, maybe a third of your deck is Custodes cards. Draw a card. If it's a Custodes, give Survivor 5 to your warlord. You can have 2 of these in your deck, and it's 2 energy. It's a Survivor 5, and you draw a card. The 5 may not happen, but if you have 2, I have gotten a game where I've gotten Survivor 10 from just 2 of those, and that's not counting Manifest Destiny, which is an automatic guaranteed Survivor 5. Potentially, you could have Survivor 15 in a deck. You have to draw Custodes, but again, if you build your deck right and you know what you've got in it, this is not a bad card to have. If you're playing like a heavy neutral card deck and you're not running a lot of Custodes, then you may want to pass on this, but it's a good card. Herculanus Sodality. These guys are common. I would almost urge them as being a must. They have Sentinel, but they're flanker. They're 2 energy, 3/3 flanker, which means for the most part, when you use them, they're not going to survive. They're not going to survive, so you don't have to worry about that Sentinel as a drawback, because it's not going to affect you the next turn if you use them properly. If you're just throwing them out early on, then you need to learn how to play the Custodes a little bit better. But these guys are probably, I want to say must-have. I throw them in every deck for right now. They're cheap. They do 3 damage, which kills a lot of things. They've got flank, which is very important. And they're Custodes, which combos with Blood Games as well as several other cards. Now, Imperial Emissary, I'm a little disappointed with this guy. He's an epic. For 2 energy, he draws a card and reduces its cost by 2. Which is kind of like an Abandoned Supplies. But you have to have him on the table, and he has to survive, and you have to pay the full 2 energy. It's not as effective. I would pass on these if you see them on the shop. I don't know if there's a great way to fit them in the deck. They are a target. If you throw them out there, your opponent's going to want to kill them because they don't want to give you free or cheaper costing cards. But I don't even think putting them behind Shapura is a great idea, because you've got to pay 2 to keep them safe with Shapura. Then you're paying 2 just to draw a card and reduce its cost by 2. So you're paying 4 energy to gain 1 card at reduced 2 cost every turn. And they still only have 3 health and 1 attack. That 1 attack is important, especially with 3 health, because even if they're behind Shapura, who has frontline, your opponent can drop a goldstone, kill these guys, and because they only have 1 attack, that goldstone will survive, and now you have to deal with that on your next turn. So just not a great card, especially for an epic. The ability seems great, and I think if it was either a 1 energy or a relentless cost, or these guys' stats were a little bit better, they'd be worth considering. But as they are currently, I'm going to have to pass. Shadow of the Throne is an interesting card. It's a way to give you a card. I think there are better cards in the game. I've seen it in event decks, and it works decently in event decks where troops and troop destruction is limited. You create a copy of an enemy troop in your deck, and then you draw a card. So if it's late game, your opponent throws down a Death Shroud, or even Artillery Score, or something nasty. You are paying 2 energy. You take a copy of that card, put it in your deck, and you get to draw a card, which gives you a chance to draw the card that you just put in your deck. And that can happen. But again, it's conditional, and you're not just drawing a card. You have to have a troop in, your enemy has to have a troop in play to play this card. And maybe you don't want that troop. Maybe you'd rather have one of your own cards in your deck. So it's okay, but there are better cards. Now, Diocletan Squad. These guys are another nice card in terms of stats. For 3 cost, they've got a rally. If you have no other troops, you're gaining +1/+1. So potentially, for 3 energy, you're getting a 4/5. That's powerful. That is powerful. Just by comparison, let's take a look at what a normal 4/5 costs you. A normal 4/5. Let's just take a look. Let's just take a look at the neutral cards. Not even the Legio cards. A normal 4/5. There's a 3/5. There's a 5/4. There's a 5/5. So anywhere between 4 and 5 energy is what it takes for you to get a 4/5, right? Let's take a look here. Do we got any 4/5s here? 3/5, 5/5. Okay, I know Chaos has got. Oh, it's almost time for D&D. There we go. There's a 4/5 with maintenance for 4. But it's got Bloodthirst, so that's the reason. Anywhere between 4 and 5 energy is where you're going to pay for that. So you're getting these guys 2 energy ahead of time, but they're a trap. They're a trap. They're a great card late game, maybe mid game, even if you're able to have enough cards in hand. But with 4 or 5, they're not going anywhere anytime soon. And if you put these out turn 2, you have locked yourself early on with a Sentinel troop that you're not going to be able to draw cards from. They work great in a Valdor deck because he can supplement that again, but by themselves in a Nassau or a Shapura deck, not a great way to go. You have to know when to play them. Good card, not a great card, but a good card. And we're back. All right, so getting back into it. Last line. Last line is interesting. It gives frontline and survivor 2 to a friendly troop, and that's cool because it works with any troop. It doesn't have to be a Custodes card. It's not bad. Giving it survivor 2 as opposed to giving it health, that's pretty nice. You can use that with a lot of things. You could just throw that on Jubok, and while he's still going to be a target, he's going to be even harder to kill. You could throw that on some of your cheaper cost cards, or even your larger cost troops, whether they're Custodes or neutral, and just a way to put another front line. It's very interesting that the Custodes have got a lot of frontline options. They really do. And that's not a bad... I like the artwork too, but that's not a bad tactic. I think you'd have to know what you're doing with that. You have to have the right troops in your deck. If you're just throwing a frontline survivor 2 on a Sentinel troop with low health, you're probably not doing yourself any favors. But if you've got your deck built right, maybe you're throwing in some Mechanicum stuff in there, and you throw that down on, even a Sibilance, which it won't work with. Backlash won't work with their survivor. That won't trigger that necessarily. Or Last Howl, or these wonderful Castellix. You're giving them frontline. You're also giving them survivor. There's just a lot of potential there. So that's cool. It's a good card. Not a bad card. This guy is a great legendary. He was just in the shop yesterday, I believe. Michaeler Coburnus. And he gives adjacent units +2/+0. He also has Sentinel. Now, he is probably the Custode with the cheapest stats in terms of a 2-3, but the value that he offers on the turn that he comes in is amazing, because that adjacent units includes your Warlord. It includes any fast or flanking troops. If you bring him in with 9 energy, you can throw him down. He makes your Warlord a 4, or at least a +2. I mean, if your Warlord has any other passes, he makes your Warlord a +2 attack. Then you can follow up with 2 Goldstones, and those Goldstones are suddenly 5s. Unstoppable attack, and then attack with your Warlord. So you can do 5 Goldstone, and then 4 from your Warlord. That's 14 damage on the 9 drop. So very good card. If you see him, don't pass him up. He's pretty much a staple in every Custodes deck. He's going to be Sentinel or not. The value that he offers on the turn he comes in, as well as the following turn, your opponent has no choice but to go after him, because everything else around him is going to be even stronger in terms of hitting back. Now, Moratoi's Wrath is an interesting, it's not a direct damage card, but it gives +3/+0 to friendly troop this turn, and you draw a card. This works really great with troops that have First Strike. It's a way to buff them up to even higher attacks. You get a card, and then you're doing your First Strike attack. It does only last that turn, so it's not huge. Between the two, Michaeler Coburnus versus Moratoi's Wrath, Coburnus is just better. He offers long-standing value that your opponent has to respond to the next turn. He's a body as well, and they cost the same. So now, Neuron Squad, these guys are okay, but they're ones that I would pass on. As far as stats go, 4-3 with First Strike is pretty brutal. They don't have flank, though. They don't have fast, so you're putting them out and basically posing a threat on the second turn or down the road to anything that your opponent drops with 4 health or less, that they will just be able to get rid of. The downside with that is they do have 3 health, and they do have Sentinel. So there are better options down the road. I would pass over these as opposed to something else. Between the two, I would rather choose these guys with the flanking as opposed to First Strike. But that's just me. Now, preternatural skill is I don't know why you wouldn't have this in your deck as a Custodes. It's a healing card. It has powerful healing. Heals 4 to your Warlord, and it gives precognition to your next turn. Now, precognition again means that you cannot be targeted by attacks. So it is a way for you to not only heal, but to duck out of any nasty troops that your opponent might have on the table. Or if they're an aggro deck or a fast flank deck, they've got they can't drop Goldstones on you. They can still hit you with direct damage stuff, but healing 4 helps mitigate some of the direct damage that they might be able to throw at you. And it's a reasonable cost. For the same cost as a Pi Alpha, you're getting an additional 1 health heal, as well as precognition. Not necessarily removing stun, but that in itself has huge value. If you're going to build a Custodes deck, there's no reason not to have 2 of those. Now, the Ephoroi, I'm going to say Ephoroi. I like this card. I like this card for a variety of reasons in terms of how you play it. I really like it in Nassau because it helps with his First Strike. It helps with his ability. First off, it's a jam. Jam is not seen enough in the game. There are some powerful jam cards. Sabotage! Sabotage! There's a rally troop that jams. There's a couple, like the Perfection troop for the Emperor's Children that jams. But there's not a lot of it. Well, in addition to jamming, this then deals 2 damage to it. And that's actually important to note because the timing in how you play this card is important. If you are playing it against a Laz Tawul, let's just say, which is just a troop that's got a buff stat, right? He's technically a 5/4 on the table. You're jamming him first. So you're making him a 4/3, and then you're dealing 2 damage to him, which makes him a 1 health, which leaves him susceptible to First Strike from your Warlord, or using Nassau's ability. It works great with troops that have Survivor, to get rid of Survivor and then kill them. It's great against Roshan Squad for the Salamanders because it jams them, removes their Survivor, and then kills them, which is a little bit easier to do than trying to throw other things at. The trick with it, obviously, is it being a situational jam card. You want to know when to use it. You want to use it on the right things. Jamming something too early, just a throwaway troop, and your opponent brings down something big and heavy later on in the game, you're going to regret that you used the Ephoroi too early. But it is a great card. depending on your deck, you may or may not choose to have 2 of these. I like it. It deals damage and it jams, so I like to include 2, but it's not necessary all the time. Now, the Velt Tactical Squad, they've got a decent ability in terms of for 2 energy, they get frontline and +2, so you can bring them in on your next turn and then make them a 3/5 and then a 3/7 and so on and so forth. But they've got Sentinel. They're 4 health initially, and they don't bring any immediate value. I think if you're starting out with Custodes, they're a good card to have stat-wise. I mean, just by comparison, Velt Squad compared to the very similar card here with, where are these? Where did I pass them? I must have passed them. Alpha Zeta, which is the same cost, but they've got 1 less health. However, their ability costs 1 energy as opposed to 2 energy, and gives them the same thing, and they don't have Sentinel. And that's a common. I'd pass on these. I'd pass on them. Now, Efferway Squad, speaking of the Efferway Squad, these guys are not bad. They've got 5 attack, which is killer. They've got First Strike, which with that 5 attack offers amazing value. And they have stealth, and that is super important in using their ability or their attack the next turn. If you can put them down there, your opponent, unless they've got some sort of anti-stealth or they're bringing out a troop with greater than 5 health, they're going to be susceptible to not being able to put down whatever it is for the next turn or two. The problem with it is these guys have Sentinel, and because they have stealth, your opponent is not going to be easily able to remove them on their turn. So what that means is you are giving up your next turn for sure when you play these down here in terms of drawing cards. Now, again, with Valdor, that's not a bad thing. Yet Valdor, that you put Efferway Squad down, you've got a board lock, you pay 2 energy, you're still drawing a troop, and you get to use these guys. Whether you use them to kill a troop or you use them to deal 5 damage to your opponent's Warlord, either which way, you're getting your value for that. That's a good card, but you got to know when to play it because of that Sentinel ability. Now, Eritan Squad, Eritan Squad. Solid artwork, solid stats, 3/5 health for 4, which, you know, kind of the opposite here of the Efferway. And the difference is for 1 energy on the next turn, they can give +2/+0 to your Warlord. Your opponent has to deal with these guys, even though they've got Sentinel, and you're giving up a card draw. Between this and the potential to combo with cards such as the Paragon Spear, which we'll see here shortly, with Coburnus, as well as other cards that buff up the attack of your Warlord, these guys for 1 energy on your next turn, and let's just say with Coburnus, can make your Warlord a 5 attack. No, yeah, 2, 4, 6. Make your Warlord a 6 attack, and that's just for 4 energy. That's very powerful, very powerful. So now we're into the gauge. While they have Sentinel, there's still a threat that your opponent cannot ignore for too long. And they've got 5 health, and that makes them a little bit more likely to stay on the board. So do they go in every deck? Maybe not, but I tell you what, they do go in for sure is Shapura. If you can protect them with Shapura, it's well worth it. Pay 2 energy, give yourself shield in front line, pay 1 energy, give yourself +2 attack. You're now a 4 energy, you're 4 attack front line with shield, and you know you're giving up drawing cards. So that is the downside. But if you've got some other mechanic, if you've got a couple of Imperial bureaucrats behind you or some card drawing tactics in hand, you can roll with that and continue going forward. Now, Halls of Terra, it's not bad, but it's not great. As an epic, it refills your energy. So what this means is this is a late game combo card, and you've got to build for it. You've got to have 10 energy to really gain the value of this card. Play 6 energy worth of troops, play Halls of Terra, play another 10 energy worth of cards. I don't know how you'd build your deck exactly just yet to make that work, and because it's a tactic and not a troop, and there's no other card drawing potential in here, I don't see it as being a 2 of. It has potential in the same way that the Emperor's Children. It's in the same way that the Emperor's Children hold the line or hold at all costs has got the refill the energy, and that's always open up potential. You can do the same thing, but I'd rather put other cards in my deck. Now, the Lentum Knights, just stat-wise, for 4/6 frontline, that's 6 health. That's amazing. Again, the downside is these guys have Sentinel. However, late game, 6 health frontline is nothing to scoff at. That's nothing to scoff at. These guys are pretty solid. And I think if you've got either a Nassau deck or a Valdor deck, these are great late game cards in order to protect your Warlord for the last turn or two. So I do like that card, and it's a common. And the great thing about these Custodes troops, I haven't touched on this a whole lot, but these are Custodes. These are not Astartes. These are not infantry. This means that they are not vulnerable to cards that target specifically infantry or Astartes. They are not vulnerable to Ambassador Melgator. I don't know if they're even available. Yeah, they're still vulnerable to an inescapable cell. They're not vulnerable to something that targets, gosh, I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's any other. I mean, the biggest thing is Ambassador Melgator, because you put down a frontline 4/6, you always run that chance with the Space Marines that they can Melgator that up. But with the Custodes, they can't. Melgator loses some value with the release of the Custodes, and he's been consistently dropping points as we've seen more cards, demons, vehicles, and such added. Now, Lex Ultima, this is a great late game card. You've got to have it in your hand, but this is that way to make up for the 2 or 3 turns where you haven't drawn cards. If you're Shapura and you're down to 1 card, 2 cards in your hand, your opponent's got 5 or 6 cards, you can play this and you're drawing 5 or 6 cards, and that's great. The downside is it costs 4 energy, so you're giving up a decent amount of your energy that turn to draw those cards. So you may not necessarily be able to play as many of them. You're playing behind at that point. However, it is a great way to refill your hand. I would consider one of these in a Shapura deck, maybe even 2, depending on how I build it. I don't have it in Nassau currently. Now, only in Death, this is their destroy card. This is the Custodes destroy card. It's conditional. So you have to have a troop on board, just like Sedition's Gate for the World Leaders, to use this. However, what's neat about this is if you destroy your troop, happens to be Custodes, you get a Telemann Dreadnought to your deck. We'll just take a quick gander at Telemann Dreadnought. You get one of those in your deck for using that card if you use it to destroy a Custodes troop. If you used it to destroy your Custodes troop, I should clarify. It's not, as far as destroy cards go, it's pretty evenly cost. It costs 4, which, 5, 6 is the most expensive destroy cost with Perfection's Flight. 8 if you count the Conqueror, which destroys all. But in terms of targeting, the problem is it's a random. It's a random enemy troop. So in the same way that Sedition's Gate lets you choose and destroys a random enemy, this also lets you choose and destroy a random enemy. The difference is you are getting a troop added to your deck, and it's a very powerful troop. Do not discount the Telemann Dreadnought. Paragon Spear is a must. Period. It's a staple. If you see this in the shop, get it. If you have it and you haven't played Custodes, you have the tool that you need to really make the Custodes open up. It gives your Warlord Relentless. Create a Lightning Blow in your hand every turn. What is Lightning Blow? Well, let's just take a look at what Lightning Blow does. Lightning Blow. Your Warlord gains +1/+0 and Bloodthirst. And the neat thing about this is this card at the end of your turn. And I say neat because it doesn't bloat your hand if you don't use it. If you don't use it, it just goes away. That's okay. You don't have to use it. But if you want to use this, you make your Warlord a +1/+0. So you instantly have the ability to do 6 damage by paying 2 energy with your Warlord, thanks to the Paragon Spear. Now, you combo that with Cobranus, and you can suddenly deal, for 5 energy, you play Lightning Strike, you play Cobranus, you can now deal 10 energy. That's 5 + 5. That's not counting Eriton Squad or some other cards that we're about to take a look at. Presidium Shield, I think if you had to choose between the two, it's a tough call. I prefer Last Line over Presidium Shield. I think that is the rare evolution. Basically, it gives Frontline and Survivor 2, whereas this gives Shield, but +2 health to a friendly troop. But it also costs 1 additional energy. If you had to choose between the two, again, I would take Last Line. But if you want to find a way to give Shield to something and some extra health, it's not bad. And by comparison, with the Salamanders card, Dragon Scale Shield. The only difference with Dragon Scale Shield is it also gives them Frontline +0/+2, whereas the Custodes one, You've got one that gives Survivor in frontline, and then you've got one that gives Shield and +0/+2. This does not give frontline. Now the Trajan jet bikes, I think these are staples. I've been a fan since I got to preview them. They're fast, which is always a good thing. Their 4 energy is not bad. They do 3 damage, they've got 5 health, and they've got Battle Honor return to your hand. And that's nothing to laugh at, because with that 5 health, it's very easy for them to deal 3 damage and kill something and survive and go back to your hand. Once you've got a Trajan or jet bike, you basically have a free 3 damage in your hand, whether that's to use on your opponent's troop or to use on your opponent's warlord at the end of the game. When I say free, I guess recurring is the better term. It still costs you 4 energy. But being able to drop those, attack, deal 3, kill something that your opponent thought was they're going to go back. They go back to your hand, then you attack. Late game, you can now turn that around and just use them to deal the 3 damage plus your warlord on your opponent's warlord in the game. These are just great cards. Need to have 2 of those. Now, Arturian Veterans, we're starting to get into the higher cost cards, the 5s and the 6s here. And these guys they're common. But look at these stats. 6/5 and Survivor 2. They have Sentinel, so that is a drawback. With that Survivor 2, you're probably definitely going to be having that Sentinel trigger. But the beauty of that Sentinel, of that Survivor 2 is that means that you get to use that 6 attack. Probably once or twice, maybe even 3 times, depending if how you heal your troops and whatnot. That's just massive nasty. That's just massive nasty. And if you time it right and you set things up, you could throw down Coburnus beside them and make them an 8/5 with Survivor. They're just hard guys to get rid of. Hard guys to get rid of. So you have to weigh the pros and cons, whether or not you include them in your deck. But if you're building a heavy troop Custodes deck, when these hit the board, if your opponent has already used their troop destruction cards on some of your other early beef things, they're really going to regret it. And these guys are just going to recoup value. Having these guys with Valdor, the next turn, all right, I'll pay 2 energy. I'm drawing another troop. Could be another one of these guys. Could be something else that we've seen, or something that we're going to take a look at. And I get to use these guys to attack for 6. All right, there's no drawback. There's no drawback at that point. The 2 energy is well spent. The damage is well worth it. So just a solid troop. So we'll take a look here at Auric Metallis in just a second. All right. Auric Metallis, or I believe it translates roughly to Golden Death. Now this tactic here, it's costly. It's a 5 energy, but it deals damage to all enemies equal to your warlord's attack. And as we've already seen, there are some very good ways to up your warlord's attack. For 7 energy, following a turn of Paragon Spear, you can give yourself a lightning blow, give your warlord 3, and then use Auric Metallis and do 3 damage across the board, which by comparison to defensive satellites is a much more reliable card. If you happen to play Michaela Coburnus for 8 energy, you're then doing 4 damage across the board without any other cards out there. Is it a 2 of in a deck? I don't know, but I really do like this card. I think it's at least a 1 of. It is a widespread damage. It's just a great way for you to wipe a board, and it's much more reliable than defensive satellites. Even Artillery Strike. Artillery Strike, if there's more than 3 troops out, it's not going to hit them all. For 1 energy more, you're guaranteeing to hit all the troops. So a good card. Now, Eternal Vigilance. As a common, this might look, Relentless Heal 1 to your Warlord. For 5 energy, it's a little costly. It's not as good, per se, as the Servo Harness for the Iron Hands. However, if you play this right on point, especially with a Nassau deck, who has the ability to precog, go into precognition and hide himself, essentially from direct attacks, this can pay dividends. I like to include 1 of in a Nassau deck. Shapura might make even benefit of that, given the fact that he can give himself shield. He requires more to damage him, and if you don't damage him, he's going to continue to heal 1 health each turn. It's not bad. There's a lot of healing here. I mean, these guys are beefy. The Custodes are beefy. They're giving your warlords some options here. Right now, you've just seen 1, 2 with preternatural skill, and technically 3 cards that can increase the health of your warlord. So, if you have all 3 of those going off at once, oh my god, your opponent is just going to be rolling their eyes. So, Eternal Vigilance may not go in every deck, but if you can find a reason to fit it into your deck, and if you can play it, again, like I said, on point, you're giving up some momentum, you might think, but in the long run, it's a guaranteed heal 1 to your warlord. So, it's worth it. The Emperor's Gift. Now, I like this. I believe this is one that I previewed here when they did the spoilers. It's a Grav Rhino, and we're going to kind of see this ability somewhat similar on some other vehicle down the road. Stun enemies that attack this troop, and that doesn't matter if they've got sneak attack, if they've got first strike, if they've got terror, they're going to get stunned, even if they don't take damage from this if they're attacking it. This does not have Sentinel, and for 2 energy, you're drawing a Custodes from your deck. Now, it's a great way to kind of supplement yourself some options to drawing troops specifically from your deck, but more importantly, Custodes troops. So if your Custodes troops are limited in your deck, it's very similar to Valdor, which we discussed. It's a great way to guarantee that you're getting them into your hand. Stat-wise, it's okay, but having that defensive stun, even if your opponent destroys it with a troop, if that troop is alive, it's still being stunned on the next turn, and that buys you more momentum. They have to really ask themselves, is it worth it, or are they going to throw away a troop, a full-body troop, to get rid of it, or do they do damage on it? Not massively offensive, but a very good utility card. I don't know if you need to pick it up in the shop. I wouldn't recommend it in every deck, but I wouldn't pass up on it. I think it definitely sees play in event decks more often than not, for good reason. Now, Tremilla support, these guys are a must-have. Period. Their stats are just amazing. The artwork is great. I love that art. That pose is just awesome. Stats 5, 6, never anything to scoff at. Even with Sentinel, doesn't matter. I mean, if these guys get to attack once or twice, that's great. But the fact that their passive is just your warlord has +1/+0. They don't have to be adjacent. They don't have to pay anything for that. They're basically the ramped up version. I mean, granted, Irritant Squad gives +2/+0, but you've got to use it on your next turn, and you've got to pay energy for it. These guys have got better stats. They're instant gratification. And again, with all the things, I mean, Tremella support in play. Your opponent can't get rid of them. Let's say on your next turn, now your warlord's got 3. You play Lightning Blow. Your warlord has got 4 attack with Bloodthirst, and then you drop Cobraness. Boom, 6 attack Bloodthirst. That's 12 damage coming from your warlord. Or you just throw out Auric Mortalis and you deal, 4 damage across the board for 7 energy. These guys are great. They support every Custodes warlord. The Sentinel on them is well worth the benefit that they offer to the deck. If you see them in the shop and you are building a Custodes deck, pick those guys up. Now, Vespucin Command, I've seen them more so in event decks. A couple times, I think I've run into them in ladder play. They don't have Survivor here. They've got 5 attack, 5 health. They do have Sentinel. Their ability is very nice in the fact that it gives +1/+0 to your units this turn, and it can act again, which includes itself. So at the very least, for 3 energy, you're giving 1 attack to this troop, 1 attack to your warlord, and you can do it again. It's very costly. So, you kind of have to gauge it, but if you don't have too many cards in hand, or you're not playing too many other troops, you can easily pump up, your units 2 to 3 times, and you're talking, just with this guy, that's 7 to 8 damage. Your warlord, 4 to 5 damage, and anything else that you might actually have out on the table as well. They are a target. They are not something that your opponent wants to survive because of their value, especially if you happen to have, 2 or 3 troops who have survived onto the table. You've got one of these guys. In addition to that, or, your frontline troops that have survived because they've got massive health, they're not bad. It's a common. I think there are some better choices. I mean, if I had to choose between the two, Tremellis versus Bespin, they don't even compare. I'd go with the Epic, obviously. But as far as if you've got lots of troops, they don't have to be Custodes troops to use his ability. If you've got a lot of cheap troops even that have survived on your next turn, you can pump them all up by 1 attack, 2 attack, and just run into your opponent. Now, Atzelton, these guys are really interesting because they're very similar to the Lehman Russ battle tank, which for a neutral card costs 8. Costs 8, and then for 4 it deals 4 damage to an enemy troop and it can act again. Okay, but these guys, who cost 6, so 2 less, they have Sentinel. They can deal 4 damage to anything. That's your opponent's warlord or a troop. And then if the target dies, it can act again. So they're a little bit more specific. They're stat-wise, they've got 7 health as opposed to 8 health. But they're cheaper. They do damage that could go to your opponent's warlord for the same cost. Even if you're not using that to destroy troops, the fact that you can just throw out 4 damage from these guys on your opponent's warlord and have them sit back there as a body as well, that's pressure both on your turn, and then your opponent has to choose, do I play troops that these guys can kill, or do I find a way to get rid of them, or what do I do? They're very frustrating. If you're running an all Custodes deck, at turn 5, turn 6, things really start to get nasty, and these guys can really put the pressure down. For 6 energy, you drop these, and then your next turn with Valdor, you can afford to pay 2 to draw a card with Valdor, 4 to deal 4 damage, build up your hand, and make your opponent come to you, make your opponent react to you. Not bad, not bad. Now, Hunting Eagles, these guys are another epic that is just a must-have. There's no reason not to have these if you can't. If you have them, put them in your Custodes deck. First Strike. Flank. I mean, what's the only thing that could make this better is if it didn't have Sentinel, but the fact that it has a 6 attack and 5 health, which makes it very hard to kill. I mean, let's just take a look just at the Custodes pool alone. On turn 6, they can kill Tribune, they can kill Vespasian, they can kill the Tremellis support, they can kill the tank, they'll be stunned. They can, they can kill these guys, which are just now. I mean, granted, they cost 2 less, but 6 attack with First Strike, it means they don't even take damage. If you can get a Hunting Eagle out, your opponent is not going to be happy. They're probably expecting it at some point. They're going to try to do whatever they can to get rid of it. The fact that they have Sentinel, again, that's a given at this point. We're talking Custodes, you're going to just see that on these cards because that's the trade-off. However, Flank and First Strike for 6 is just oodles of value. Now, what's interesting is a Hunting Eagle can come out and First Strike a Hunting Eagle because they've got 6 attack and 5 health. So if you're playing a mirror match, if you're playing a Custodes versus Custodes, you really got to gauge when to use your Hunting Eagles. You don't want to throw them out there first and have them, then sniped by your opponent, who then throws his Hunting Eagle out, but get the value out of them. Just a great card. Just a great card. I was glad I picked up 1 in the initial Custodes event, and then I think I picked up another when I did the crate opening. Definitely one to have 2 of. Now, Tribune is the only card I do not have for the Custodes, and eventually he'll be in the shop, and then I'll be happy. I'm trying to look at the artwork here. Oh, okay. All right, I see. His head is all the way up at the top there, and there's a big old sun thing behind him. Let's take a look at this. Let's examine this guy. He's a 6, which is kind of creepy in of its own right. He's got first strike, which we've just seen, 6 attack with first strike. I mean, that's just gnarly. He's got Sentinel, but his battle honor, he can act again. What does that mean? I mean, he's basically where the Hunting Eagle can come out and get rid of a troop. If you can drop out Tribune and your opponent can't do anything to him, and you bring him out behind a front line, or you bring him out and he still has like 2 or 3 health left to him because your opponent wasn't quite able to kill him. Even if he's got 1 health, he can wipe your opponent's board. Tribune, by himself, let's take Ornitov's Barge is a widespread. It's not as popular, as hot as it used to be, but it's still a great card. But what does it do? It brings in an Imperial Army troop with front line. If you happen to have 4 troops plus your Warlord, you're going to give your opponent 5 frontline troops. However, the beefiest troop that a Ornitov Barge can randomly generate is the Forced Ogrins, which have 6 health. Tribune, even if your opponent was lucky enough to, let's say, roll all Ogrins, this guy can single-handedly kill them all. He can wipe out an entire Ornitov's Barge, take no damage, and then attack your opponent's Warlord if you so chose. That's craziness. That's craziness. I'm looking forward to picking him up at some point in time and making him work. He does have to survive to work, but there's ways to make that happen. Given the fact that you're starting to throw out Custodes troops, your opponent's options, especially if you've gotten these guys out to turn it to a head and maybe drawn some of the heat from your opponent's destruction cards. I just shudder to think, if you're playing a troop deck and you see that against you, you know that you have a massive uphill battle or a losing battle at that point in time. Tribune is just good. Does he go in every deck? I don't see why he shouldn't. As far as Custodes go, I really don't see why he shouldn't. He's not a massively high cost card. He's a very affordable card, and his value, just don't even get me started. And then just to give you some other ideas. I mean, if you happen to put Mortoy's Wrath on him, he's then a 9/6 for the turn with first strike, which means he can kill just about, I think there's only about 4 or 5 units that have a greater than 9 health in the game. And if your opponent happened to have all of those onto the table, those are the only things that he wouldn't be able to kill with a Mortoy's Wrath. Come on, that's just disgusting. Now, Acetome Terminators, at this point in time, when you get to the 7 energy drop, things really start getting beefier than they were before. Yes, Sentinel, okay, but 7, 9 frontline. These guys are not a vehicle. They're not an Astartes, and they're not an infantry because they're Custodes. So, again, unless your opponent has a destruction card, they cannot bounce this card to your hand. Melt Bomb is not going to work on this at all. Melgator is not going to return it to your hand. It becomes a giant golden wall, and just, I mean, even if they wanted to destroy it, and they couldn't destroy it, they've got 7 attack coming on them in the next turn. Just too powerful. Just a good, and a 7 cost card. I mean, they can survive. They can survive a Vengeful Spirit. They can survive, a Pride of the Emperor. God, they could survive the killer cards that your opponents have fallen back on to use with a 9 health on that same turn. We're not even giving them, this wonderful Presidian Shield or Survivor 2. That's just on their sheer base stat alone. Just a good common. Now, the Sagittarius Dreadnought. Sagittarius is actually interesting. He's actually the first Custodes Dreadnought. He was actually the first Mortoy. I'm kind of curious why he's not the warlord, but I think every guild didn't really have a choice in that regard. His stat is very interesting, 9/7. He's kind of the opposite. He is a vehicle, though, so he is susceptible to crack grenade. He is susceptible to melt a bomb, but his ability, he's got a built-in destroy card, basically. He can't destroy Custodes or demons or vehicles, but for 3 energy, he can destroy an infantry or Astartes. So you kind of have to decide, I mean, is it really necessary to destroy that? I mean, are they a frontline troop? Maybe are they have a powerful ability like Malgahurst, or do you just go right at your opponent with the 9 attack? If I had to choose between the two, it's a tough toss-up. Tough toss-up. I mean, why not both? Why not one of each? I don't know. I like the character. I like the history of Sagittarius. The Emperor carved in his dreadnought armor there that only in death does duty end, which, you know, I think was supposed to be some sort of honorific, but really it's like the Emperor was just being a dick. Like, no, you still owe me, bitch. You're still mine. You're still mine. Get to work. Now the Aquilian Terminators here, in the same way that the Assatem Terminators are Custodes, these guys just ratchet up a notch. Now they don't have front line, but they're passive. If your warlord is attacked, deal 3 damage to the attacker. They're kind of like the Shadow Wardens of the Raven Guard in terms of they dealing damage. The difference is where the Raven Guard Shadow Wardens came in stealthed and have a 6 health. These guys have a 9 health, and they don't need to stealth themselves because they're just brutal. You can either find a way to deal with them, or you can take the damage. And it doesn't matter if it's a troop or a warlord that's attacking your warlord, they're taking damage. We're just getting into ugly stuff here. Now, the Caladius Annihilator, it's an interesting vehicle. It's their 8 cost. It's a legendary. It's got shield. It has Sentinel. It also has that wonderful stun ability that the Grav Rhino has. This is a Grav tank. So anything that attacks this troop is going to be stunned. And for 4 energy, it's dealing 4 damage twice. Now, it's 4 damage to the same target. It's not 4 damage randomly. It's not 4 damage, and then you pick a different target, and it does 4 damage. So what you're dealing is you're dealing 8 damage. But what's very interesting about that ability is it does it in 2 orders. And you might think, well, why is that special? Why is that important? Number 1, it uses the first part. You can use it to break shield. You can use it to kill it or bring a troop that has survivor to the survivor point. So basically trigger their survivor and then finish them off with the second 4 energy. Or at the very least, just use it on your opponent's warlord and deal 8 damage. There's nothing wrong with that. In some odd matchups, if you happen to have a Jubok against Raven Guard, you could probably apply that with Sentenced. Or any other card that, like, if this deals damage or when it takes damage. But I mean, really what that's useful for is breaking shield, breaking survivor. You can use that on Vulcan, and he's not not safe because unless he has beefed up his survivor naturally. If you've already gotten him to that lethal point at that point in time, he's only got survivor 3. So this single-handedly can kill a Vulcan by himself, and because it's got shield, it has to be attacked or damage the shield and then attacked again, and whatever's attacking it is going to be stunned. It's very costly in terms of it is an 8 energy, and then you have to use it on your next turn. It doesn't go in every deck. As a legendary goes, I mean, I would probably say that's a possible pass. Do you have to have it? No. If you do have it, you can definitely use it. You'll find reasons to use it. And again, you're getting into this range here where your opponent is really going to be scratching their head in terms of what do they throw their nasty tactics at, or do they just at some point have to give up because they don't have any answers. You know, have they used their ashen blows and their outflanks on your Assatem Terminators or your Aquilian Terminators or your Hunting Eagles, and then you bring out the Caladius Annihilator. Just gnarly. And Benediction. Now, this is their big, costly tactic. It's not a closer, though. It's not a closer. The The Custodes themselves, as you've seen, do a lot of damage, and they combo with a lot of damage, whether with themselves or with their warlord, just by beefing up their warlord. That's how they wrap up the game. They're very similar to that in regards to how the Thousand Sons are combo-oriented, or the Raven Guard are combo-oriented faction. They don't have a big closer, but by working several of your cards together very efficiently, you can easily find ways to end the game. Benediction is a healing card. That means heal 5 to all your units. Your next troop or tactic costs 0. So you're getting double use out of it. You're giving yourself 5 health to your warlord, which, again, I mean, that's 1. That's 2. That's 3 with Preternatural, and Blood Games is 4. 4 cards just within the faction, not counting neutral healing cards that heal your stuff. Now, but this doesn't just heal your warlord, it heals all your units. So your Tribune, your Hunting Eagles, maybe your beefy front lines, the guys that you've just been using to do damage with their Sentinel, and you got 1 health left, but you want that nasty 5 attack still, it heals them. And then as an added kicker, your next troop or tactic costs 0. So basically you get to play 2 cards at 9 or 10 energy. So make the most of it. If you can follow up a Benediction with a Callidius Annihilator or a Telemann Dreadnought, good game. That's a well-played card. If you can't, it's okay to play a Hunting Eagle following that, or a Tremellus support. There's nothing wrong with that either. It just gives you the option to, not just heal. Now, what's interesting about Benediction, and one thing that I like about it, you heal 5 to all your units. I like it because by comparison to Mortarian's Resolve, which both these have got some great artwork, this heals 5 to your warlord. You're drawing 3 cards, and you stun all your enemies. But you're not able, because it costs 10 energy, you're not able to do anything else. You're giving up your turn to draw 3 cards, get 5 health, and then your opponent has a turn to play cards, but they can't do anything with what's on the board. This changes the dynamic of that in the fact that you're healing 5 to all of your units. You're not drawing any cards, but you're also still able to play another card to capitalize on that healing. So not only did I heal my units on board, but I also put down one more thing for you to have to deal with. Or, again, not just a troop, a tactic. So you could play that, and then just for stupid stuff, you could then play Orbital Bombardment. I like the potential. I like the implications of that. I'm going to heal 5, and then I'm going to do up to 10 damage to your warlord. I mean, what's not to like about that? What is not to like? That's a massive. That is possibly the most expensive and over the top swing in health. 15 health, up 5, and then down 10. Now, granted, it could hit troops that they have if they happen to have any, but I kind of want to see that happen now. I'm gonna have to play with that. I'm gonna have to play with that one. Is it in every deck? Maybe, maybe not. I haven't found a way to squeeze that into my Nassau deck because I like my cost cards a little bit cheaper. But I might find a reason for that. Now, Censure, I don't like Censure as much as I like Auric Mortalis. It deals 3 damage, so it's a guaranteed 3 damage, and it can cost 1 less when your opponent plays a tactic. There are tactics in this game. There are a lot of decks that are making ample use of tactics. If you happen to start out with Censure in your hand, or you draw it in your first or second turn, the value on it is going to go up, because in the course of several turns, it's going to go from a 9 cost to probably a 2 cost. And for 2, you can deal 3 damage to all enemies. That's great, but it's situational. It's situational based on what your opponent is playing, based off of their momentum. The reason I don't like it is for that reason, because if your opponent doesn't play it, tactics, or you draw this late, and they only have 1 or 2 cards in hand, they're not playing as many tactics heavily, then you've got a 7 or 8 or even a 9 cost card that just does 3 damage when, for 5 plus 2 or some troops that are on the table, we've seen, you can do the same or more. So by comparison, I would rather have Auric Mortalis versus Censure. And then we get to Telemann Dreadnought. Now these guys, I think these are possibly the beefiest troops in the game. As far as health goes, there's a couple units that have got more health. I think, the Devourer of Worlds has got 15 health, and there's a couple Imperial Army tanks that have got 12 health. But they don't have Survivor 3, and they don't have Shield, and they don't have Frontline. I mean, what's not to like about any of that? The only downside is that this is a vehicle. Because, if you have Sentinel, okay, fine, it's got Sentinel, whatever. At this point, you resign yourself to playing it with Sentinel, knowing that you're not going to be drawing any cards on your next turn. But the only downside really is that it's a vehicle, because that means that it can be melta-bombed. That's really it. And they're melta-bombed, or if you're going up against the Iron Warriors, they could also rack and ruin it. Destroy a vehicle. That would be sad. You throw out that nasty thing, and then they're like, okay, well, I'll pay 5 energy and get rid of it on my turn. But at this point in time in the game, if you've got a Telemann Dreadnought, and I don't know if you need 2, I think 1's good enough. If you got a Telemann Dreadnought and you drop it, your opponent has probably wasted their big destroy cards, and it's going to be frustrating for them, because either they've held on to the one that they've got for him, or they've blown him, and then they have to take 7 damage, and he's got Frontline, and he's got Shield, so even with taking 7 damage, he's still going to be unscathed, essentially. His shield will be removed, and then he can just do it again, and he's protecting your Warlord all at the same time. This guy just wows me. Just the beef, just the level of beef is just not to be understated. I would urge everyone to have at least one of them. Do they need to have them in every deck? That's up to you to decide, but I don't think there's ever a time you'll play it and you will regret not doing it. The fact that they've got Survivor 3 and Shield, just in your basic decks, aside from your opponent playing something like Conqueror or outright destruction, they have to throw a tactic or a body at it to break the shield. Then they have to throw a big body at it or tactic at it to bring its health to 9. And then they have to throw yet another body at it to get rid of that Survivor 3. That's 3 plus cards to get rid of this one card. Conditionally, that so long as they're not packing Melt-A-Bomb or Rack and Ruin or some other thing that gets rid of vehicles. I will say this, it would be a shame if you're playing against Dirac Rask and he, pings you with a Meldon squad and then eats the 7 damage and just destroys it. And that's the power of Dirac Rask. And if that's the case, then you should really know not to play a Telemann Dreadnought unless it's going to win you the game. But I just like that card. I just like that card a lot. Now, Shield of the Imperium, I don't like this card. I don't like it. It's a 10 energy. It doesn't have Sentinel, which is nice at this point. I think that's one of the highest cost cards that doesn't have Sentinel for the Custodes. It's got 12 health, but it doesn't have Frontline. It's relentless as draw Custodes from your deck, which at this point in the time, do you need any more Custodes in the game? Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but it's not doing anything else for you. It's just a big fat body. You might see this in an event deck. You might see this if you're a new enough player with Custodes and your card pool is limited. But I would pass on this. I would find better use. Just by comparison, if you can do a Telemann Dreadnought rather than the Shield of the Imperium, you have got ample value. You're giving up 3 health, but technically you've got that Survivor 3 as well as a Shield, so you've got more than 3 health, and you've got Frontline, and that's very important late game. So that is it, guys. That wraps up the Custodes finally. It's been a while. I kind of waited just to see if they were going to do anything with the Sentinels. They might still. Some of these cards may change. I mean, all cards are subject to change, but some of these cards, I think, are not seeing enough play, and as a result, may be changed shortly. But overall, they function pretty powerfully. The Custodes are a combo-centric deck, combo-centric Legion, and they really focus on healing or protecting your Warlord, and then using your Warlord as the weapon. Your Warlord is a Custodes. He's better than a Primarch in some eyes. He's definitely better than a Space Marine, and as such, he should be able to inflict massive lethal damage. The potential to use Cobraness or Lightning Blow, or just even a Ayrton Squad, and then for another 4 energy you could use Orders from Terra, which allows you to act again. You can make your Warlord a 4 and then act again. If he happens to have Lightning Blow and he's got Bloodthirst, then he can attack twice, Orders from Terra, and attack twice again. And just with Lightning Blow, he's attack 3, so 6 damage plus 4 energy to do another 6 damage, and you've just done 12 damage to your opponent's Warlord, most likely, for 6 energy. Now you've taken, at the same time, you will have taken 8 damage, but you should be up in the damage game at that point. You should be winning. If you use that, games are going to be short. Games are going to be short if you can get those combos off. And again, that's the way combos work. Take a look at the combo deck video I just put up. We'll kind of go into that a little bit more, not necessarily with the Custodes, but how they work, how they function, and I think you'll find that they are definitely a faction that plays in that realm. So that is it, guys. I've made it. I made it through. I did a card by card for the Custodes, and it's going to be a while before we see a new faction. However, we did get 20 new neutral cards, and we're getting a couple new neutral cards through the course of the event as well. Right now, we're just getting an emote. But we just saw the, I don't want to say Captured Forge. I don't think that's the name of it. And I just picked it up in the shop, too. What was it? It was a Mechanicum card. There we go. Oh, Forge Fame. That's what it was. Forge Fame. So we're getting a couple of new cards added at this point. This is the phase of the expansion that we're at. So I will probably do one more card by card to cover the neutral cards that were added with the Prospero expansion. And I got to tell you, they are awesome. I'm really digging the potential. The things that they've added. There's only one thing I'm disappointed with is the fact that none of them help deal with the issue of stun. But what they do deliver in the game, what they do offer in the game, is very nice. So I'm looking forward to talking about those and giving you some ideas in terms of how to use some of them. So we'll get to that next time. Anyways, that's it. Thank you for tuning in. I hope it's been helpful. Despite all the distractions and interruptions and cuts that I've had to make, the Custodes are here, and they are beefy. And if you can find a way to trade off not having as many cards in your hand, but you can make the most of the cards that you have on the board, you can do a lot of damage. But you do have to manage how you play your Sentinel troops, and that's the most important thing I can say. Don't just throw down a big beefy troop because it's beefy if it has Sentinel. You have to ask yourself, is it worth it, or can you wait? Because ultimately, card advantage in any card game goes miles, and while they are trading themselves stats for that card advantage, if after 2 or 3 turns you are down to no cards in hand, it's not a great place to be. Your options then become just non-existent, and you do not want to be in that position. So keep that in mind. I hope the stuff here has been helpful, and some of the opinions are worth mentioning. If you've got any thoughts, feel free to comment. Let me know what you think. Is there a card that I didn't really go into detail enough? Is there more that you'd like to hear? Is there some neat combos that you found that you're putting to use? that you'd like to share. And if you like Telemann Dreadnought, give me a hell yeah. Alright guys, that's it for me. We'll talk to you next time. Alright, bye. Alright, that wraps it up for me. If you liked what you saw, feel free to like and subscribe. Add any comments below. And if you think the video might be useful or the series might be useful, feel free to share that with other players that you know as well. And we'll talk to you later.